morning, everybody. It is Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama. Jamie, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little sick right now. I caught a little something from my son. He's, that's why we missed yesterday because he's been sick. But um, outside of that, I'm doing pretty good.
We're hanging in there. You're hitting and hustling this morning, and we thank you for being on the show and making this happen. Good morning to everyone who's tuning in. I see we've got Chris in the show already. He says good morning. Thank you for joining in, Chris. Rajon says good morning, boys. Good morning to Rajon. John Murphy. Good morning, Beat Navy. We're going to be talking about Navy a little bit more tomorrow. We're going to be diving into that. I wanted to get into on this show. I wanted to get into some of the Clemson stuff on how Notre Dame kind of out schemed them on offense and defense. We're going to pull up some clips. I put some slides together, Jamie, that I told you about. So that's going to be real fun. So we're going to do that. And we're going to talk about a new commitment that Notre Dame got this morning from Carson Hobbs, a cornerback from Ohio. So if you're just tuning in now, thank you very much. And if you're tuning in later on replay, thank you very much for tuning in. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button. Get the show out there for everybody. Hit the notification bell if you haven't already, so you know when we're going live. You get an alert to your email, then let you know. All right, Jamie. So Notre Dame picks up a commitment from the 2024 recruiting class, Carson Hobbs, 3-star cornerback out of Cincinnati, Ohio. He just recently decommitted. I think it was from South Carolina. Do I have that right?
Yep, South Carolina.
South Carolina, right. So tell me about Mr. Carson Hobbs. I know you did a film review of him. Tell me what Notre Dame's getting there.
I like him. I mean, he's a long kid, a guy who can play, has the kind of traits to play man coverage. You see him a lot in press. He's got good feet. He's got loose hips. He can run. I think he's a guy you see like pretty good instincts in zone. He's a scheme versatile kid. I think there's still, obviously a lot of room to grow in his game. But there is a lot to like about him. Like obviously you see his flip his hips and go there, which is something you always want to see with a guy who can run vertical. And I do think, you want to see like more with a lot of these corners, you want to see like them get tested vertically because you want to see them run. Right. And that's why sometimes too, like the special team stuff that's why I don't even mind sometimes when they're like guys put he's chasing a guy down. I'm like, that's good. Because that might be the only time you see him run because everything else might be just in front of them. Right. So, and obviously, I mean, I wouldn't say like he pops out as like a burner on film, but he's a guy who can run. And I think too, one thing I like, one thing you just showed there, him breaking off something in zone, finding the football. Right. Finding the football, always an important trait. Something that matters here, right? Outside leverage, right? He's got help inside, but look at him defend this, right? Like inside hip in phase makes a play on the ball, right? You love to see that. Yeah. And, one thing that I think, matters, it's not everything because obviously there's so many guys who get offered, right? Get offered early, right? But the one thing with the South Carolina offer is one, Torian Gray is their defensive backs coach. He's the guy who was a long time Virginia Tech guy, just outstanding evaluator. When they were kind of like up there with LSU for DBU, that was when he was there. Produced numerous guys in the NFL, guys who were like 3-star, low 4-star guys who end up being like studs and being drafted in the NFL. He's the guy who found them and developed them, right? So when you see that right away, that's always kind of like, oh, okay, like, South Carolina, like Torian Gray, who's been in the NFL, he was at Florida recently too, and did a great job at Florida in terms of like finding and developing guys there too. So that's something. And I also think too, now like Mike Mickens is kind of to the point too where he's proven he's a pretty good evaluator, right? He's a
Yeah.
pretty good evaluator. So I think one of those things too is when you see a guy who, like Mickens, when he likes somebody, and especially after Benjamin Morrison had the day he had, you have a lot of more trust in that evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, the traits, right? So you look at the length, you look at the ability to play press, you look at the ability to play zone, like play off, and that sort of thing. We've seen a couple instances where he's coming up and play the run. So you like the physical profile, right? Like 6'1", 180. You like longer corners, like a Cam Hart kind of build, and obviously that's like a really good thing to have. I think too, when you have a class like Mickey and Morrison, where it's like, okay, those guys are going to be kind of hits for Notre Dame. And then you have Christian Gray and Michael Bell, who it's like, okay, like we've got some guys who are like higher profile. So you take someone like Carson Hobbs, who it's like, hey, he's going to little bit of time, right? And look, he's 2024, right? So he's a junior. It's not like he may need time. Like this is one of those things, like his potential could start to be reached while he's still in high school, right? It's like Brent Smith in the comments. He's disappointed in the commit. I kind of think that we're beyond looking at stars and making a judgment just solely off of the stars, right? Like you have to look at
people should be.
Right. And you have to look at the roster. You have to look at the scheme fit. You have to look at, what a player can do. How they fit into the roster and how that is so at some point, especially when you're building up a bunch of numbers for a position, the ranking, especially for a junior, it's just kind of meaningless. I mean, just as an example, like Devin Moore last year, who Notre Dame lost to Florida, like he's playing a bunch for Florida this year. Same kind of ranking, right? Like same no-name kind of guy.
Too. He was a star.
Right, Devin Moore, and he has a similar kind of build, right? And so they're obviously looking for that type of athlete. So I don't, it's not obviously not every player is going to be a 5-star and everyone loves and that sort of thing, and that's fine. But I think I just looking at the profile and looking at what Notre Dame wants, I'm got to be super happy about this commitment.
I do. I totally get where Brent's coming from. I mean, I think everybody wants the guys who are highest rated. They want the highest recruited classes. They know that the guys generally, the guys who are the highest rated end up being the best players, right? So, I think that from that perspective, it's totally understandable. You also have to remember that, I mean, there's going to be like a million rankings updates by the time the guy actually plays at Notre Dame, right? Like they're still playing the junior seasons are still going on. There's going to be the after the junior season, and then there's going to be camp stuff, and then there's going to be other updates that go on and stuff. Like they look at like, oh, this guy ran track, this guy did this guy, all of those things get added up in between, right? Like, so like, I just don't think it's something to get worked up over now. I think he has the profile of a guy. Like I personally, I have him as more of like a low 4-star kid. I think, he's someone that, and obviously it's, everything is a projection, and you think like, where's this guy going to be 2-3 years from now? And that's the way you kind of view it. But you have to wait and see. And obviously, like, I think like the other reality with it is when guys, it's just a fact, when he is, was committed to South Carolina and then he commits to Notre Dame, well, guess what? They look at him again because they're like, well, Notre Dame liked him, whatever. Like, and people always think that like, Notre Dame, you get the bump down, and maybe sometimes that happens or whatever. But certainly, like for a guy, if you're, at a school like South Carolina, which is obviously it's an SEC school, it's not like a bad school. Torian Gray is respected, but there's still going to be things they look at when they evaluate guys, and they'll relook at guys after they, all of a sudden, like, oh, this guy got a Bama offer, this guy, whatever. That always happens all the time. So it's a long way to go.
Right. And at some point, I would like it to get to the point where it's like, oh, this guy's rated low, but Notre Dame offered him. Well, that might be something, like we're always like, oh, well, he has a Bama offer, or he has he has a Georgia offer, must be good. Right. Like, I want to get to the point where it's like, well, Notre Dame offered, he must be good. Right. So you want to get to that point. Obviously, you're when you hit on someone like Ben Morrison, you hit on someone like Jaden Mickey, who weren't top 100 guys, then that you kind of build that reputation. So yeah, good commitment. Everyone, I think, should be excited. It adds on to the 2024 class. It's also obviously a very good start. So hopefully that keeps going. And look, everyone talked about the Clemson game and what does that mean for recruiting? Well, it meant a lot to Carson Hobbs, who was I think he was at the game, correct?
Yep, he is. Yeah, he also grew up as a Notre Dame fan.
Grew up a Notre Dame fan, so it helps, right? It helps from Ohio. So you always want to have a foothold in Ohio for Notre Dame. So it's good. It's good. Something to be very happy about. So Carson Hobbs, 2024 commitment cornerback. Jamie, I don't know about you. We're going to transition over to the Clemson game again. And I don't know about you, but I have not had as much fun watching a game back as I did that game. I've been watching it, honestly, not even from an evaluation standpoint. I just like watching this game, and I'm going to keep watching it over and over again. But you put out some really good things. And I think that especially on offense, when Notre Dame is lining up like that and they're just kind of running at them, you kind of feel like there isn't a bunch of scheme involved and there isn't a bunch of, little wrinkles, things that the offense is doing to, get over on the Clemson coaching and the Clemson staff and that sort of thing. It's just like man ball, we're running at you, right? And there's no wrinkles and that sort of thing. But you did a really good question about, you did a really good evaluation of what Notre Dame was doing on offense to give Clemson problems. So why don't you talk about that a little bit? Because I know a lot of people are, it's something you kind of wonder, like what did they do, right? So just kind of go over what Notre Dame did in the game and how that manifested to running the ball so well.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is what they showed and Tommy Rees showed in the game is you can do a lot of things formationally in calling the same play and how that changes the play and how it changes the defense defends you, right? So he talked about duo is obviously it's this core thing for Notre Dame, and it's been a core thing for a while. Certainly was last year, definitely this year too, right? Where which is like double teams at the point of attack, inside. And what it does is it kind of forces the second level defenders to kind of choose, like, I got this gap, you get this gap. And then the back has to have good vision, good patience, and then gets to kind of see where that double team is, those double teams are taking things and going from there. Right. So this is the one in the fourth quarter, right?
Yes.
So here you see that, Jaden Thomas, he's, kind of in almost like an H-back, kind of like a wing role on the left. And then you have the two tight ends, right? Evans and Mayer on the right. And what it does is, so because those guys are both there, that adds gaps, right? So the one extra tight end adds another gap that you have to defend, right? And it widens out, like the edge has to go wider. Everybody's got to kind of shift down. You have to have enough bodies to do it. And if you don't, then you can take advantage of it, right? And and then especially, you still have to go out and block. So it's not like they didn't go and like bully them, or like no one on Clemson was winning a matchup or blowing out or splitting the double team or anything like that. So you still have to do those things. But when you do this, and then all of a sudden you're running duo, and you add another gap, and they're not accounting for that gap, that's how it opens up. That's how you get like an 11-yard run, just from like where it's like the only guy who can make the thing is that deep safety. That's the only guy who can make the tackle, because everybody else is like, there's not enough guys to defend, right? So
and that's who ends up making the tackle. And so if you look, it's hard to draw a combo block on a combo double team on the on the screen. But basically what you have is the two guards double, or the guard and the tackle double on the D tackle, right? And so they do the double team, and wherever the linebacker goes to that side, that's who comes off and picks him up, right? So if he goes outside, then Fisher will pick him up. If he comes inside into the A gap, then Lug will pick him up, right? And so that's why when people talk about like, oh, space eaters in the middle, when you want someone like the late Lewis Nix, right? Like, he was so effective is that you try to come off and do a double team on him. You can't, because he's occupying both the guard and the tackle, right? And so that lets the linebacker be free, right? And you have the same thing with the Garrett Patterson on the other D tackle, right? Double team onto the other backer. And then the tight end's able to seal. And if the tight end gets a seal, it's going to be a huge hole, right? And obviously we can't run the whole play on here because of a copyright thing. We already got dinged for that. So that's why. But like, this is where you just kind of put out the fact that like, this is how Notre Dame creates a mismatch on just by overloading a side. And the other part of it too is, Clemson essentially has 8 in the box here, right? Because of where Jaden Thomas is lined up. So they have 8. And the thing is that that's really all you can do. At some point, it gets to the point where it doesn't matter anymore that you have 8, because Notre Dame is
well, it's really 9. It's really 9.
Right. Because of the outside corner right out there. But like, he's not gonna be like a super hard field player, because that's a corner, right? Like, they're not used to that. So at some point, you negate the fact that they have a bunch of bodies, because you have a bunch of bodies. So that's kind of where that comes from. I'm going to bring up another one here, where this is the green, Jamie, is where they do the cross dog. That really is ineffective based on how they line up. So why don't you talk through this play? This was the play right after the one we just saw.
So it's the same play. It's like the same call, right? It's duo, right? And all it is now is, instead of having Thomas there, you have 3 tight ends, and they're all on the same side, right? So now it's, and they like to call that, it's an unbalanced formation, right? So it's like, really, there's 2 guys to the left side of the formation for Notre Dame, and there's 5 on the right side, right? And even you could just look at this right now. You don't have to be a football expert to look at this. Notre Dame has more guys, more blockers than they have people. So it's already not a good thing for Clemson, right? So as soon as they see this, Clemson needs to be like, I mean, I don't know what their checks would be.
The linebackers need to be.
The linebackers need to be like unbalanced, or whatever they call. Whatever their call is, whatever tackle over. If this isn't a tackle over, but whatever they have a call, they should have a check to it, right? They should have known, right? It should be something that you build in the defense, because you're going to see it from a lot of teams, right? So it's not just like a Notre Dame thing. It's something you could see from a lot of teams. And Notre Dame obviously is to the extreme, because how many teams will line up 3 tight ends on the same side? Not a lot. So, but still, that's what you're getting here. But Clemson right here. So you could even say too that Wes Goodwin, who's the defense coordinator for Clemson, he's got to see this and be like, oh, we got to get out of this cross dog right now. Because I mean, there's a small chance that they hit on the blitz and they blow it up and whatever. But if they don't, it's going to be bad. And it was bad. And then all you're going to have is that safety there who's deep to defend it, right? So, you have too many guys on, the one side, not enough guys to fill in those gaps. And so they run that cross dog inside, and essentially there's nobody in. There ends up being nobody in the B gap, the gap between Lugg and Fisher, and that defensive tackle, much like what Notre Dame does with their cross dog, right? They have that guy lined up on, the outside shade there, and then he goes out, right? And is doing it because he's opening it up the middle for the blitz, right? So here, and I believe that's Tyler Davis there who's doing it, and Tyler Davis comes out outside of Blake, right? And if he stays there and he's playing that gap, and he's playing that gap inside of Blake Fisher down blocks, they run right through that gap, the C gap, right?
Because the two tight ends there in not the most outside, but the two tight ends, Mayer and who is that? It's Evans. Evans. Yeah, probably Evans. Those two tight ends are double teaming the end there, and then they're going to scrape off to that linebacker or safety, whatever it is. So if he down blocks, the hole is going to be enormous. It's going to be huge. But since he went outside, then the hole is into the B gap.
Yeah. And then all Blake has to do is adjust to that. And then he just walls him off basically. And then there's the hole in the B gap. But now you're counting on that opposite side, the left side inside linebacker who's coming as the second, crosser or on that blitz. You're counting on that guy to get around. And that's just like a losing proposition. Like, I mean, Lugg this is such an easy pickup. Lugg just steps right to him, and he steps right into him. And there he
runs straight into him. And then the other one runs right into Carell.
Yes. And I mean, Lugg and Carell do a good job on it. I'm not saying they didn't do a good job. They did a great job, but it's just one of those things where the call, there's just times where you might have a call on, and you just got to scrap it and play like base and just make sure you got every gap covered. And they didn't. And so even though this is the exact same call, but just because the formation set it up, and that's why it was just automatically successful. And maybe if they just ran this with, Evans on one side, Mayer on the other side, and they run this cross dog, maybe it gets blown up, right? Maybe it gets blown. They run duo, maybe it gets blown up, right? But because they added that extra gap, that is what allows them to have and makes this an easy run.
Question and a comment. I guess first a comment. So we noticed throughout the game that Notre Dame was sending the linemen to the line late. They would spread out the wide receivers. They would stay in the huddle, and then they would break the huddle. They would go to line of scrimmage real quick, snap the ball, right? And when that happens, it doesn't give time for the defense to adjust. They can't make a check. And the line, the line and the linebackers, they have to line up based on, center, guard, tackle, and that sort of thing, right? So it takes them time, right? They don't know to make the check to move someone over. And a question for you, because this is how I viewed it when I was playing in the back as a safety, but I wasn't a part of like line calls like this usually. And I didn't think of it this way, but I think of it now. Like I think of it this way now. I wonder if that's right. When the offense goes unbalanced line, what you're essentially doing is, so the two backers are blitzing into the A gap, but that's a bit like both sides of the A gap. But because the line is unbalanced, they have to move the line over and then treat the A gap as if it's Lugg? Like, does Lugg then become the A gap?
Essentially.
So that's the mistake, is they're blitzing as if the A gap is still the actual center, when because of the unbalanced, it's actually moved over one.
Yeah.
And that's where they're outnumbered, because you can see to the play side, like you said, they have 4 defenders. It's 5-on-4 to the play side. Yeah. And even though they basically have 9 up here, if not 10, it doesn't matter, because they're shifted the wrong way, and therefore the numbers are actually against them in this situation.
I love that you brought up that thing about them coming up to the line earlier and them not adjusting. But the one thing I'll dunk on Clemson here for was this wasn't the case here, because this was when Notre Dame was milking the clock and coming up to the line and they were coming out of the huddle a bit late, but still they were snapping at the ball at like 2 seconds or 1 second on the play clock, right? So they at least had a chance to see the formation and do something, and they didn't, right? So, I mean, it's pretty much simple. Like the backside tackle, like how he's a one tech inside shade of the guard there. Like he's either got to go head up on that center or, whatever. And everything's got to just shift down. And then, you know what? You also have the chance of but especially because of this, in this situation where they're trying to milk it and they're coming out of the huddle late. So if you kind of adjust over and then maybe the numbers are to the left side, well, now Notre Dame doesn't have time to check to a run to the left side, even though that is the ideal number for them, right? And that's what makes it worse too, right? So it is like a chess game, and there is a lot of that, but it's also sometimes, really it's more like checkers, because it's like it's just simple math, right? And Tommy Rees and the offensive staff did like a way better job of it than they just triple score, whatever, boom, boom, boom. They just did it.
Right. And this is another unbalanced here where they just run power. This is power, right?
Yes. This is power. Yeah, this is power. So, it looks like that first play, right? Because now instead of Thomas as the wing, you got Lorenzo Styles as the wing, right? On that side. And all you see is, on that side too, you still see where numbers wise, it's even, right? 4 versus 4 there on that side. So you're like, okay, they're Clemson should be okay, even though one of those guys is a corner, but still, right? Like that's still 4 versus 4 there. But then as soon as you add the puller, that's when
that's the fifth player.
That's the fifth guy, right? That's the fifth guy. And really the corner, I did a really good job on this play of kind of I don't know if I'd call it feathering it, but he played it soft and because if he comes up hard on it, it's either you're going to come up and make a play or you're busting it and you're giving
it's a house call.
It's a house call, right?
Yeah.
And I think he played it the proper way. And on this play too, where Evans and Mayer did a good job on the double team, and Mayer got to the safety and got enough of him. But if he had just had his helmet on the other side of the right side of that safety, then it would have been a house call as well, because Diggs could have cut it up, right? So, so it just kind of shows you but just because of what they did schematically, that's what got them the thing. So even though they blocked it well, but not perfect, and Clemson kind of defended it pretty well, but even that, it still was like 8-9 yards.
It's a 10-yard gain. Yeah. It was a first down. Yeah. I mean, that's what a numbers advantage does, right? And that's like scheming them out of it, right? It's scheming yourself into a numbers advantage. It's like they know we're going to run, but they don't know what we're going to run, right? And little subtle changes makes it so you could put you got 9 in the box, but it doesn't matter because you're on the wrong. Your angles are all messed up. Like angles on the line play is so important. And that's why, when you go back and watch the Holtz days, right? 96, 92, 93, whenever, teams knew Notre Dame would run, but you don't know which running play. And if you line up wrong and the angles are wrong and they run the right play, you're going to get gashed. And that's what happened. And that's what happened in this game. So over and over. Here's a question from CFB Hertz. What's the advantage of going pistol on these plays instead of under center? Does it force the defense to respect the pass more?
Well, not necessarily, because I think play action from under center is different. What it does is it offers a chance to, do more of an RPO,
right?
Potentially. So, Pine could drop back. He probably wouldn't even fake it, really, right? He would just see it and say, so what happens here is Styles, he doesn't block, really. He just goes out and widens out that edge there. Mm-hmm. But it's if that edge comes crashing down, that's something where this didn't have an RPO baked into it, but you could have an RPO baked into it where all of a sudden, like, you just throw the quick bubble to whatever. So I think that's part of it, for sure. And then because of this too, it's like, it's a timing thing, right? It's a timing thing. And certainly you can run power from under center too, but if you watch how like Diggs plays it and how his steps are, like, it's very like, not like a counter, but I mean, it's not quite, it's like, it's different than him just hitting it, like where he probably would hit it and hit it at an angle if Pine was from under center. So his drop and how he's hand off, it makes it easier for Pine essentially.
Right. So it kind of goes into the conversation we had, maybe it was a couple weeks ago, about pistol and play action and that sort of thing. So Pine's going to turn and hand it to him, right? Well, he's turning his back to the defense and he can kind of hide the ball. So, and to answer the question, CFB Hurts, it does force them to respect the pass more, because you have to slow play the run a little bit, right? So the corner, he can't fly up there because maybe he doesn't really see the ball, and he has to respect the fact, like, so Mayer can come up here and block and then release, and he has to respect that, right? Like, just because they're showing run action, Mayer can still pop out, right? And he can go up the sideline. And so you have to respect that sort of thing. And what Jamie says is it brings RPO into play where maybe it wouldn't with the back next to him, because the back's in the way, right? And so it's not that you have to respect the pass more. It's that as a defensive back or as a linebacker, you're thinking it. You're just thinking about it. And the fact that it's in your mind kind of takes your focus away from the fact that, like, okay, I have to read my keys, right? Like, you're just thinking, okay, pistol, they could do X, Y, Z. Whereas if he's next to him, it's like, okay, maybe it's X, Y, right? You're not thinking about the third thing. So pistol brings another set of plays into their mental picture, which slows them down, right? And if you're slower, we talk about this all the time. How do you slow down the defense? You just give them things to think about while, like, pre-snap thoughts.
Yeah.
Nothing slows down a defender more, especially in the secondary, than pre-snap thoughts and what I'm having to think about. And when you're in pistol, you have more thoughts. And when the back's next to him, it's like, okay, they're going to do X or Y, and I don't have to worry about the other stuff. So that's kind of where it comes in, basically. And that was the crux of the whole. That's kind of the crux of the whole conversation that we had a couple weeks ago. So it is a very good question. Very good question there. All right, Jamie, this is some of the pressure stuff that Al Golden drew up here, and how he basically overloads a side without compromising the defense in the back. So why don't you talk about this one?
Yeah. First of all, I always mention when I'm talking about, when I'm doing like rewatch notes or I'm doing like a film don't lie thing too, about like fitting a blitz, and because everybody's got to kind of do their job. And I think people think a lot of times too, if you're just like the lay person who's watching a football game and you're thinking, oh man, it's just attack. It's like, you just want to, like, wild dogs get after the quarterback. And I mean, there's a part of that, but it's a very small part, because you have to be able to kind of fill gaps. Also, just in case they run the ball here too, you have to have your run fit and all that too. But when you fit a blitz, it means like the key here is, so look where they're overloading the left side, and you got Justin Admirola, you got Tariq Bracy out there as the nickel up on the line, and you got JD Bertrand, who's outside of in between them, right? And by the way, those are Bracy and Bertrand, late movement there. So that wasn't a show thing. It was like late show. So they went there and go right away. So really, Clemson didn't have anything here to really like deal with it, right? And if they did, maybe they probably would have switched to protection, right? And slid Shipley over, or done right. Something else differently, right? Maybe, that's the kind of thing that they would do. But yeah, the arrow that you're using for Justin Admirola, that's the thing. Look, he's all the way outside of the tackle, but he's got to get inside of the guard. And that's like a long way to go, but you have to go there, and you have to do it while you're stepping laterally, but then coming up the field too, because if you go too lateral, you get washed down, and then that kind of like screws up the rest of the rush, right? So he has to be able to do that and then come up the field. And Bertrand, kind of similarly, right? Like he's pretty far out, and he has to come inside shoulder of that tackle, right? And it's all because that tackle has to step down, or he has to make a choice. He either has to say that left tackle, who's a good player, Jordan McFadden, a very good left tackle for Clemson. He has to make a decision. You know, I step out to take the nickel pressure, or I step in to take Bertrand. And obviously, the rule 99.9% of the time is take the inside, right?
First threat,
right? So he goes, Bertrand steps inside, and I mean, Bertrand even beats him. So he does that job too. But because Bertrand comes in that way, even if Bertrand got picked up and Bertrand got in, obviously, on this sack, Bracey was coming in totally free.
right?
So those other guys just won their one-on-ones, but the scheme was the whole scheme is set up for Bracey to be free, right? And he is, and he's been a very good blitzer. He got a sack later in this game too.
I have that next coming.
Yeah, and so, and you know, and people might say, well, why do you drop? You know, I understand. Like people are like, why do you drop Foskey? Like he's our best pass rusher. All this, everybody thinks that, but it's all because of the scheme, and then also because of that right tackle is thinking, he's thinking he's got Foskey 1-on-1, and he's thinking all of these kind of things about like, well, he's going to bull rush me here. I got to be ready for this. I got to do that. And he's thinking about all his passes. And then when Foskey drops off, then he's like, oh crap, where's the next guy? That's what you have to think there. So, and obviously Foskey can drop and cover too, but it's because of all these things. People are worrying about Foskey in a certain way. And then all of a sudden it completely changes the whole dynamic when he ends up dropping out. And then you kind of that part of it with how they fit the blitz on the other side. And that's why it just works so perfectly in a sack. And you haven't seen a lot of this kind of stuff from Al Golden this year, which I thought we'd see a bit more of, but now we're seeing it like the last 2 weeks, really. And I mean, considering the success they've had, I mean, I think you're going to see more of it. And I think the other thing you see is JD Bertrand is a really good blitzer. Yeah. He's a guy who can get small. I mean, he is kind of small a little bit too. He's not the biggest guy, but he can get small, make himself small, and make him hard to block. That's why McFadden couldn't pick him up.
Right. And the other part too is Notre Dame. So Clemson sets the protection. Notre Dame shows late. Now the quarterback sees it. And honestly, the line probably sees it too, or at least some of them, not on the right, but on the left, like McFadden, for example, he sees it, but he can't unilaterally change the protection on his own. He has to communicate it to everybody. And there's no time for that. Like, so the quarterback sees that Bracey's coming. They're sliding protection to the right, and Shipley's releasing. So right there, there's too many. There's too many that are coming. But since like, our protection is not good, linemen, a lot of the time, they try to split the baby. And it's like, okay, I'm going to pick him up, and I'm going to try to pick him up. And everyone's kind of thinking that. Yeah. And it's just like it just leads to bad protection overall because they know they're in a bad spot. And that's another part of it too. So like Bracey comes free. GJ knows I got to get it out, right? So he kind of misses the crosser that comes open. The crosser isn't even looking. So even if he threw it, he wouldn't see it. And he sees Foskey drop. So it's like, I can't go hot this way. I have to turn around. He tries to hit the double crossers here. And meanwhile, DJ Brown's just sitting there. And so is Brandon Joseph. That's cut off. Marist is sitting in the middle. They have no chance. He puts his head down and it's a sack, right? So it's great. It's really great stuff. And this one, I thought, I mean, this blitz I thought was unbelievable. And Shipley blows it, by the way. He needs to come over and and pick up Bracey. But I mean, you have Bertrand who shows to the guard, flips around to the center. So the guard is going to preoccupied with that. The nose guard, which I believe is a cross, he loops around and occupies the right guard. Maris comes out on the left guard. So obviously the center, the guard, and the tackle are all occupied. Bracey's definitely coming free, no question. And Shipley blows the coverage. He needs to come over and pick him up. He misses it, and Bracey gets a complete free run, at the quarterback, and he makes the sack. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, and this is the beauty too of having a guy like Cross, who obviously isn't the biggest guy, but I mean, watch this guy hold up against a double team. I'm like, I don't even know how he does it at 275 pounds or whatever, but he does. But when you get a guy like that, you don't get a lot of nose guards that can move like he does. So
yeah,
you can do a lot with movement with him that you wouldn't be able to do. And that's why too, like using him and Adam Ola and like with some like tackle stunts, like this kind of game with like Bertrand, like this is perfect. Like this is exactly what you want to see. And it's a lot to handle. It's something that like, even you could have the right protection and still get beat, right? Because, Notre Dame's got some pretty good pass rushers too, but, and I'm just always in favor of like, just attacking protections, like just make them think. Because when you make these guys think, they get slower. They get indecisive. They're thinking about all these other things, and even or maybe they act decisively, but they act wrongly because of it. And that's like the beauty of all this. And I mean, I just love it. I love watching. I mean, to me, it's like, one of these things too. Like, I mean, obviously, you want to be able to win with just straight 4, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But when you add in this kind of stuff too, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Another one from CFB Hertz. Another question. You mentioned the linebackers showed blitz late on this play. It seemed like they showed it much later all game long than previous games. What changed?
I wouldn't say like, I mean, in terms of some of the stuff what they were doing with cross, I actually thought in this game too, they kind of like mistimed a lot of cross dog stuff too. I didn't think they had a good beat on DJ's cadence in this game. Like it kind of seemed like that's kind of why they might have been able to blow up some stuff earlier in the game. Maybe it got a little bit better later. I don't know. I don't know what changed and why they decided it. It might have been just something that maybe like Clemson is just good at setting the protection right early and getting the right check. And if you do it late and that, this is the kind of thing, or they won't change late, or they won't, once they're in it, they're this, right? So it's like, once they get past this point, like I do think like there's, the one thing you notice with this coaching staff is there's like, this is incredible attention to detail of all these like little things. And I think, you could point out like, just like the Brian Mason, just looking at how they did tight punt in the warmups. And, that's something that it's not like crazy or anything. I know it's crazy to some people, but that's what like, literally that's what people do in warm-ups.
We talked about this in high school. My high school
everybody does it. Yeah. It's like what the coaches like. When I was coaching high school, I never even watched the guys warming up when we were doing team stuff. I was literally watching this and I was like, oh, that guy's limping. This is whatever. Oh, look at this guy line up here. Look at that split here. I wonder if that split stays in the game. We got all these kind of things you see, whatever, right? And that's just like in warm-ups, but I mean, you see like a million little things on film too, right? Yeah. And you kind of tell, because those are the kind of things, because often in these games too, like 2 or 3 plays can be just a massive difference. And that's kind of where you're at. So it might've just been something that they noticed that it's just like some of it with Clemson in terms of like sign stealing, right? And they did all that extra. Well, it's like they did it for a reason. Like Clemson is notoriously great at sign stealing. So like that has helped them a lot. So that's when they can't get that it changes things.
All right, cool. All right. We're going to transition into some non-Clemson scheme related stuff. All right. This is from Chris Wojak. I'm going to say Wojak. I don't know how to say that, Chris. Tell me how to pronounce your name. My only question of the day is: the New Year's Six still in play if we get 9-3 with the win over SC? I realize it's unlikely, but is it possible?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's. I mean, who knows? Like enough teams could lose that it could be possible, but I don't know. I mean,
I think there's something with like I think Clemson or North Carolina would have to make
oh
the
yeah,
playoff.
yeah. I
Or
think
something there.
I think it's probably highly unlikely because Notre Dame ends up being like because like okay, how Clemson and North Carolina are right now. I mean, that's why you want if both those teams go in with one loss, well, that's two of those teams are going to New Year's Six bowls, right? Because
Yeah.
you know, and I'm assuming that none of them are going to make the college football playoff, right?
Right.
So there's that, and if you just kind of did the math, like I mean, UCLA is probably going to go to New Year's Six bowl, but based on how it is right now, like they got a good chance of going 11-1. So if they go 11-1, and I mean maybe even 12-1, I guess they might be playing or 11-2. They might be the team that's playing Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, right? So in a rematch there. So I mean, there's probably going to be two teams from the Pac-12 or one might get into the thing. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's going to be hard. And really at this point, like it's fair. They lost to Stanford and Marshall. They probably don't deserve to go. I don't care how the rest of the season went. I mean, they deserve to get into a good bowl game, play on New Year's Day, right? But a New Year's Six bowl, probably not. I mean, I that would be one of those ones too. Like if I was just like this average college football fan, you'd be like, oh gee, Notre Dame's in the Peach Bowl, and you're like, how are they, like this team? They lost to friggin' Stanford. Like that's you'd be incensed, and I could totally get it.
Yeah, like it's not even a question of deserved. It's like, look, if you drop games, you shouldn't drop games, right? Like that's not good. You should not do it. So you get what you get. That's just how it goes. But so we'll see. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it's like last year we were fretting about if XYZ happens, can we be a playoff team, right? Like I don't have the energy to, do all the machinations of how we can get into the Cotton Bowl. It's hard. It's hard. I just look, beat USC, and I
just win out. Who cares who they play?
This is what I'll say, Chris. In all honesty, if Notre Dame ends the year beating Clemson and beating USC, I mean, what better team are they going to face in a New Year's Six bowl that is going to kind of show like, oh, this is Notre Dame it's like a talking point, but honestly, I wouldn't even care. If Notre Dame beats USC this year, I am going to be the most annoying person in Southern California. I'm just telling you right now, it's going to be a problem. I will do a 5-hour morning after pod if Notre Dame beats USC this year. It'll just be me just laughing for like an hour straight. So I almost feel like it's not meant to be. Brent Smith, a serious recruiting question. 247 Sports Composite had Adon Schuler rated at 93.69 at the end of his junior season, but now he's rated 90. Did he get worse, Jamie?
I mean, he did. Not the film I watched. He didn't get worse. I don't know. I don't know how a lot of this stuff. Like, whatever. It's hard to rank guys, but I don't begrudge any of these guys. That I don't think they're doing like a bad job or anything like that for the most part. I mean, I would be a lot more critical of rivals than I would be like 24/7 in general with their rankings. But and certainly some like ESPN as well. Like they certainly have some, head scratchers and stuff, but like, I don't know, people do their own evals. And I think what 247 has become is they've done like a lot more stuff, and they've added guys who have worked in college programs. So it's not like these guys are just, don't know anything. Right. And like Barton Simmons before, when he worked there, is a very knowledgeable guy. And obviously he's working at Vanderbilt right now. He's a knowledgeable guy too. I think it's just, they add in a lot of stuff. when it's projectable, where they're like, Adon Schuler didn't run 400 meters and this other guy did. And then he is the second fastest guy in the state or not even, he's the fifth fastest guy in the state in this. And that translates to whatever. And, fair enough, whatever. Some of that stuff I think is super valuable. And I do value it.
Right.
But then there's some of it, like, I just remember, like, this is one thing that was just crazy insane to me with Jalen Sneed last year is the one guy for 24/7. And I apologize. I don't mean to, like, I'm not like trying to like subtweet him or whatever version of that on this thing. I just don't remember his name. So I don't want to act like I'm just calling somebody out and not saying his name, but there was a guy who does the national, one of the national recruiting guys for them, who was like, Jalen Sneed we don't have a timed 40 on him. So because of that, we're reluctant to give him a 5-star status. And then I was just like, there's literally this like thing of him doing like this crazy, insane box jump that was like, you know what I mean? That like one of these like viral things that if like an NFL guy did it, it would just be nuts. People going, it's like, he's a freak athlete. Like, we don't need you. If you need the 40 time to tell you that this guy is a freak athlete, then you're doing it wrong. Then you're bad at it. Like that's wrong. Right. So, if you tell me another reason, if you said like Jalen Sneed, I'm not sure about, the guy's played defensive line. He's played linebacker. He's played safety. I'd like to see him. I know he's got to do this things that developing at linebacker. I'd be like, okay, that's fair. Whatever. Like, you add that into your eval. But when you say like, I'm not sure about the athleticism because I don't have a 40 time, when it's just, there are like publicly available videos of him doing freaky athlete stuff, let alone just running down dudes on the field. That's bad. That's you're getting too deep into it for me. And so I don't know what the deal is with Schuler and why they bumped him or whatever. Also too, like, they might've seen, this is the other thing. Someone who's like their New Jersey guy might've seen Schuler during a game and been like, oh man, I wasn't impressed with Schuler that day. But if you go to the game and that's the only game you saw of him, and he like, he had a tight hammy that day or something like that, that can affect your ranking too. So I don't know, maybe that was one of the things. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't know why they did it, but I mean, I certainly think Adon Schuler is a heck of a ball player.
I mean, it's weird that he would drop a rating. So it's one thing to drop a ranking and a rating, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes a guy will drop in the ranking, but the rating will stay the same. So, but
could also
for him
be
to
some
drop
intel.
in the rating.
Yeah. Could also be some intel they got. Like I don't know, right? Like
I like him as a player. I think he's, especially next to Peyton Bowen, I think they're just like a very good tandem.
I have had things where I've like rated somebody high and then someone's told me something about them where I'm like, oh, that makes me rethink it. But I try not to change it because I want to be just true to what I actually watched. But I mean, sometimes I have changed it because I was like, oh, that's like concerning or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know. But like, I mean, certainly I think Adon Schuler, I mean, from just pure football perspective, I mean, I thought he's looked better. So,
yeah. All right. John Murphy asked, despite the Bama game, do you think BK wins the Clemson game if still here? First of all, Brian Kelly's not beating Bama with Drew Pine at quarterback. Just tell you that right now. Like, congratulations to him and everything. I think winning this game with Drew Pine at quarterback is more impressive than winning against Alabama with Jaden Daniels. So that's just how I feel about it. So what do you think, Jamie? Think they win?
I mean, it's like one of those impossible things to say.
Right.
Maybe he would have won. Because maybe he would have done exactly what Notre Dame has done and kind of leaned into their identity and still done that. I think that's something that makes sense. That's something that Brian Kelly would do. In saying that, Brian Kelly never won a game like that. He never won a game where he had like the quarterback was so much worse. He never had a game where, he basically had to be one-dimensional, and that was the only thing that he had to do against a team that had an equals, like a strength that was supposed to be equal or better than it, right? He just didn't. He never did that at Notre Dame. And I'm sure he probably did it at Grand Valley or maybe did it at Cincinnati. I don't know. But he never did it at Notre Dame in 12 years. So, I mean, he might have done it, but I mean, all evidence at Notre Dame, like, I mean, to me, it's like a completely different thing when it's like people were like I tweeted that out after the game that I was like, this was a better win than more impressive win than anyone that Brian Kelly had at Notre Dame. And I think because of the circumstances of it and, the context added to it, that's part of it. Right. I mean, that's a good point, Rajon, too. Like, I mean, Brian Polian's not getting anyone to block that punt. So they okay, I'm going to change it right there. Rajon makes a good point. Add it into the L column for BK.
That's a true fact.
That's a good point. It's a good point. It's a really good point.
I mean, I mean, I don't know.
He's not hiring Brian Mason as his.
They got Ben Morrison committed when Brian Kelly was on staff, but he wouldn't be committed if Marcus Freeman wasn't around, because Marcus Freeman basically told him, no, you're not committing to Washington. Yeah. And so he wouldn't have been on the team. So
yeah, it's also one of these things too, where like Marcus Freeman might be the head coach of Duke if Brian Kelly was like. There's all
right. There's a lot of moving parts. What I would say, this is what I would say is Brian Kelly knew this game was on the schedule, and he ran away from it. So that's what I would say. So I don't know. He didn't want to try. He didn't want to try to win this game, which is fine. He doesn't have to do that. He would never would have thrown the dagger shot to Michael Mayer to make it 35-7. I mean,
no, I don't think.
Would it have been 35-7?
Probably not, because they wouldn't have blocked that punt at the beginning. It might have been a 0-0 game for the whole first half, and that changes exactly how. Then Cade Klubnik doesn't get put in the game, and he's not throwing that pick that sets up. Like, there's a lot of different things that could have happened, but I mean, obviously, I don't want to like people just act like there was one guy on Twitter who was like really like insistent to me, like this is just Brian Kelly, whatever. It's like, I mean, Brian Kelly did a very good job at Notre Dame. Like the guy, what he did in the last 5 years, he deserves all the credit for all they did and all they accomplished, and getting to the playoff in 2 of his last 5 years. Like, that's awesome. 10 wins, whatever. That's great. Like, congrats to him. Like, that's awesome. But there were certain things he didn't do, and winning a game like this was on the list.
What I explain to somebody is, because LSU fans are obviously very excited, and I was like, look, you can be excited, but if Brian Kelly is at LSU for 12 years, you never win a playoff game, you never win a New Year's Six game, and then he leaves.
I mean, he's not making 12 years.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, like, if that's true, and then he leaves and tries to take your whole staff and the recruiting class, what would you say? What would you say about him? You'd be saying exactly what we say. Yeah. And that's all there is to it. So that's how I feel about it. All right. Jamie, I think we're going to call it. I think that I had a good time. I had a good show.
I had a great time.
We talked about it and everything. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Subscribe, like, do all those things. We're going to be back tomorrow. Is that right, Jamie?
We are.
We're going to be back tomorrow, same time, 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. We're going to be previewing Navy. It's going to be great. We're previewing Navy. Jamie's going to tell us about their run defense and if it's really that good or if it's a product of their pass defense being so poor. And then we're gonna keep it rolling. We're gonna keep it rolling into Saturday, doing the post game show and then the morning after show on Sunday. So hey, hit the like, hit subscribe button. We will talk to you guys tomorrow morning.